All right. Well, I'd like to welcome everyone on this cold February day to joining us tonight at another installment in the Catherine Kerr Vital Energy and Health and Healing lecture series that we're doing, and also workshop series. And this is a lecture series that we've been running for almost 3 years now that focuses on the potential for vital energy, in particular qi, as it is understood in Chinese traditional medicine and cultivation technologies, to be able to heal and improve the lives of people around the world. And we're very happy tonight to begin this spring or winter season with a very fascinating speaker. Tonight we'll be introducing Josh Paynter, who is a Chinese medicine practitioner in upstate New York. He is also the co-founder of the Parting Clouds Taoist Education, an international community of practitioners of Quanzhen and the Longmen sect of Quanzhen Taoism. He has translated the main liturgical texts of the Longmen sect and teaches classes concerning the doctrines within these texts, including, I should add, some texts that have otherwise been kind of woefully understudied in the academic community, but are absolutely essential to the living practice of Taoism. He also writes and teaches on the subject of Juyo and talismanic practices, and is himself an ordained Taoist and an educator. So it's with great joy and pleasure to welcome Josh Paynter to speak to us tonight, and I'll be looking forward to this lecture.
Thank you, Larson, and thanks, Anne, for all of the emails and making sure that everyone can be here tonight. I've been a longtime fan of Brown's Contemplative Studies department, and I really do. I'm very grateful for my friend Professor Di Fiore for inviting me here tonight. This is really a privilege. One I'm quite nervous about, providing, but it's a privilege nonetheless. So I'm here, as Larson has proposed, to talk about Taoist medicine, but particularly what I want to do, because that's a huge topic, by the way, and it's one that could be approached from any number of angles. One could be the technical, obviously, which is to say to teach something to teach some methodology of Taoist medicine. So I will not be doing that. Another could be to give a sort of historical overview of Taoist medicine. I don't want to do that either. Because of the nature of this series of lectures, which I'm honored to be among some of the speakers that have come before me, the centrality of the notion of qi is obviously what we're most concerned with. And I believe that Taoist medicine and the discussions around Taoist medicine, particularly that I want to have with you tonight, really they flesh out a certain understanding of qi that is actually, I haven't seen it very well articulated myself, and I'm not proposing that I will articulate it well. I'm just saying I'm going to talk about it. That remains to be seen. But I do think that we're all well versed in the discussions of qi that concern qi as this multivalent thing that's an energy and has form as well, or could be formless and form, all of those notions of something that can be transmitted from one place to another in the contexts of Chinese medicine and the channel theories and qigong practices, all of that. And even in the context of herbal medicine, the varieties of qualities that an herb or a plant has that we describe as it being that material substance is qi. But in Taoist medicine, there's something else that we can talk about here. Before I go any further, I do want to say that I am aware of the problematic nature of the term Taoist medicine itself, by the way. Taoist medicine is a recent collect-all kind of category that really represents multiple strains of medical practice as engaged by the Taoist community that can include traditional Chinese medical interventions like acupuncture, herbology, and massage, but also includes a whole host of other practices that fall into a particular realm that is religious in nature, which is essentially um, uh, prayer, whether written or spoken. And it's in this written or spoken domain of prayer that we find really the true sort of the most visible facet of what we could identify as Taoist medicine within the multifaceted structure of Chinese medicine as a whole. Taoist medicine collects a group of practices. Sometimes I'll name a few. Juyo is one, which is incanting the cause. Tianyi, celestial medicine, is one of the other names we have for these types of practices. Fulu, talismans and registers. Fuzhou, talismans and incantations. All of these things are essentially very similar practices, just with different names. All of them include visualization, incantation, and written form in varying degrees and mixtures, which is distinct from regular acupuncture, herbology, and massage. Now, these incantations, visualizations, and written forms can also be added to acupuncture and herbology and things like that, that is the threshold that allows us to describe something authentically as being Taoist in nature in terms of medical intervention. And so this is what I'll be talking about. This is what I want to talk about, is the medicine that is inclusive of written and spoken prayers and the visualizations. And I'll get to what those can be and what they mean that go along with these other aspects. So that's what I mean by Taoist medicine in a nutshell. The key word that I want to sort of propose in the beginning here, before we go on, and I want it to kind of reverberate with you throughout our time together, is it's a weird word. It's imbuement, or to imbue something. This quality is the quality that we're going to talk about in terms of both methodologies and the practitioner themselves. Because imbuement is the key concept that will help to form a basis for us to understand this particular understanding of qi, which is to say, imbuement is a qualitative change in some substance or being that is instigated by proximity or intention from some other thing. And other things as well, obviously. That's not the only definition of imbuement, but that's what I want to talk about, is how something of mundane and humble nature can be elevated to be either A, a practitioner, or B, a medical substance. In a nutshell, we can say that Chinese medicine as a category, as a whole, is a variety of methodologies that seek to harmonize the human being and their internal realities with the cosmos as the exterior to the human's internal cosmos, and have those things function in a harmonious way. There are two types of qi that we're referring to here, and that would be like the the qi of the individual, sometimes we refer to this as zheng qi. This means so, and the qi of the external world, which could be, when we're talking about as the external world as in a non-harmonious interaction with the human being, that the external qi is called a xie qi. So oftentimes xie is translated as evil qi, zheng qi as the upright. But we can also, I think that we should look at these two terms in a different framework, and that would be that zheng means straight and xie means crooked, because those are other meanings for these two terms. And this is really only specifically saying that the straight and the crooked are inconsistent with each other. The straight is neither correct and the crooked is neither incorrect. It's just that they're incompatible with each other at that particular time. Xie qi includes warm, cold, damp, and dry. Those are pictures that actually be the opposite of an evil. They could be a medicinal, a yearned for or hoped for event for a human body in need of dampness or dryness in turn. And so Chinese medicine as a whole is the rectification of the xie and zheng, the external and the internal, so that there is a parallel, harmonious quality between the human being and their surroundings. If we interrogate the Huangdi Neijing for a second as the sort of preeminent primordial Chinese medical text, if we were to make that assumption, it could be said. If we neglect to run through and abbreviate the 162 chapters of the Ling Shu and Su one, and we just go to chapter 1, and we ignore everything after the first question, we can get a view of the primary initiating conversation between Huangdi and Qibo to get an idea of this idea of harmonious quality between the internal aspects of the human being and the cosmos as being the preeminent definition of health. Don't worry, we're going to get to qi in a second. The first question proposed by Huangdi to his astrologer, it's his Qibo at that point is referred to as Tianshi, or celestial master. It's not celestial master from the Taoist movement. It's celestial master Tianshi, as in like an astrologer. And we'll see this actually played out in the answer to the first question. Huangdi asks, why did ancient people live to 100 with rigor or vigor, and nowadays people, modern people, this is modern people 2,000 years ago, modern people die at 50 decrepit? And Qibo gives him essentially a 3-part answer and then goes on to describe this with a little more detail. But he says people are decrepit and die half the lifespan that they naturally should have because they don't know the Tao, they don't know yin and yang, and they can't keep a calendar, or they don't know the calculations. So he then goes on to express in detail a variety of moral failings of humanity, moral failings. And we can see there that Qibo has answered in 2 really interesting and important ways. That our health is contingent upon harmony with the cosmos and upon an internal harmony that's derived from, I don't want to say it so early, but I suppose I can, that's derived from from our moral fiber. In a sense that's not like we mean moral and ethics necessarily in a modern Western religious kind of way. He's, because Qibo says, people are having sex all over the place. They're drunk when they do it. They don't, it's really, he takes human beings to task and says, this is what's wrong, So, but what he proposes at that point is something that we see throughout the Taoist families from the very get-go all the way until today. We see that precepts become a preeminent aspect of the conditioning of the practitioner, which is to say, the precepts are part of the management of one's qi. They're part of the cultivation of one's qi. They're also, interestingly, part of how human beings harmonize with each other and how human beings harmonize with nature itself. So we see that in general, harmonization in all contexts that we come to, which is self-harmonization, outward harmonization, and social harmonization, are all hinged on this notion of do this, don't do that, to some extent, some kind of rules. And so the practitioner of Taoist medicine is particularly concerned with this feature. The development of the Taoist medical practitioner, sometimes we're called exorcists, sometimes we're called all kinds of other things. But the essential feature of our development in terms of the qi that's required to do what we do is ethical and moral cultivation through precepts. This is generally speaking a prerequisite to, I'm a member of 3 or 4 different lineages of Taoist medicine, and in all of them, there's a preceptual basis for any of it. Then there are other things that happen as well, and I'll talk about them specifically. So this is how the human being is imbued with the qi necessary to provide the care that we do in Taoist medicine. I just want to pause there for a second. I just want to leave you with that. This notion of imbuement, this notion of rectification, as in, by the way, this is not a Taoist view. This is much older. I mean, Mencius, when he talks about the sprouts of virtue, proposes that the Confucian virtues as such, as they are worded, is actually sort of the flower. He proposes that you have to cultivate a root or a sprout to arrive at that flower. And he does so by basically proposing a set of precepts. It's not that one should be benevolent. That's kind of weird because that's the end goal. He proposes that one should care for other beings. That's the sprout that bears the fruit of benevolence, for instance. And so we don't just keep precepts in a fruit picking kind of way, we do it in a fertilizing the sprout kind of way, if you know what I mean. So hold on to that thought for a sec. I want to now look at the idea of imbuement in the general Chinese medical context, utilizing, because what I want to do is I want these ideas to converge. So we have this initial idea here of human cultivation, rooted in this passage from the Huangdi Neijing and through the Taoist lineages and their relationship to precepts and all that. And I know, by the way, I'm at a very high altitude here. This is an hour longer or less. I can't really get into these things as I would like to. But of course, you can feel free to email me if any of this inspires you. And we do have Q&A here tonight too. So leaving that aside, now moving into the realm of herbal medicine, I want to discuss how deep this notion of imbuement can go concerning qi. Because if we're thinking of this as a moral construct in a human being, I want to propose that it's also viewed as a very real material concept as well. That it's not just something that takes place in the human consciousness, it's something that we can see taking place in the natural world as well, or at least in terms of how people, human beings, interact with the natural world. So, excuse me, I have a little cold, and I'm sorry if I'm sniffling into the microphone. I know that's horrendous. What I generally do in this discussion is, it's really nice that we have a compendium from the Ming Dynasty, the Bancao Gongmu, because If Leisure, by the way, the author Leisure Jen, if he set out to create an arc for Chinese herbal medicine, I think he did just that. It was a successful mission, because a lot of what he maintains in the Bunsao Gongmu is actually lost. There's a lot of substances that we would call obsolete that are in there. And it's in these obsolete substances, actually, that we can see writ large and very clearly some very interesting things that are currently left out of our relationship to herbal medicine in the Chinese medicine community, like totally left out, except for a few cases. And every time I'm with students in the various doctoral programs that I teach in, if I ask about these places that it is still latent, it's not within their education, it's left out as being superfluous. So let me give you a few examples of the notion of imbuement in the Chinese materia medica, so that we can see how these qualities can affect naturally occurring substances, not just an intelligent, self-conscious being, self-aware of those changes. Let's just take one example. I'll start with one loose. I'm not even going to name the medicinal. I will name the other ones. Let's just start with a piece of wood. You have a piece of wood. It has its inherent qualities of wherever that tree was born from a seed, wherever it grew up, whatever qualities it endured from the weather nearby, the locality of its maturity, etc. Then it's cut down, then it's made into boards. Those boards are qualitatively different than the tree itself. Clearly, something's changed. Now, what if those boards are made into a fence? And now what if that fence is put on the east side of a domestic enclosure? And then what if on top of one of the boards of that fence, a rooster perches itself? And then what if when the sun rises, that rooster starts to crow? And what if that rooster does that every single day on that very same board? Is that board the same as any other board that came from that tree? Specifically in Chinese medicine, the answer is no. It is not the same. It has qualities that have been imbued into that board by virtue of its total context. That board that the rooster sits on and the sun comes up and the yang of that morning spurs that rooster to sing its song and crow its crow, can be taken, formed into a medicinal, and that medicinal can be given to people who have lost their speech or their ability to speak. This is how this type of medicine works, what I'm talking about. That board that was anonymous, and like any other board, was imbued with new qualities by its context. Now, though that one happened in a natural setting without any human intent, right? So this is a very naturally occurring scenario. What if we take some cat gut and stretch it out and wind it into a string? Animal parts are a huge part of the materia medica. So cat gut is probably in there somewhere as cat gut. But if it's formed into a string, it's now imbued with the quality of connection, etc. Whatever you want to think, you should do so artfully, by the way, creatively. What if that string is put on a crossbow? Now that string has the quality of propulsion now. It's been imbued with the signature of propulsion. Now, if we take that string and we remove the trigger from a crossbow, we now have an herbal formula. We lace the string, we tie the string around a pregnant woman's abdomen, we burn the trigger to ash, we feed her the ash, and these two medicinals together provide for a speedy and safe childbirth. So you see, the qualities imbued into these substances are the signature which is imbued into the human. It has nothing to do with the material itself. It has only to do with its function in its past life. Now that one was manipulated by humans. So what that suggests to us is that these are not just found objects, these are manufactured objects. And I don't mean manufactured in the manufactory of the string itself. I mean intentionally imbuing everyday objects with medicinal qualities to bring about ling, or efficacy. You know the word ling. Can someone put it in the chat for me? If you want to. I don't know. Do you care? There's efficacy, numinous, this word we're also aware of. If we're here, maybe we already know the term. And so, there it is. Thank you, Ken. This numinous quality, this efficacious quality, can be something that we intentionally provide to mundane things. For the Taoist medicine practitioner, as we'll see in a minute, this is of extraordinary central importance. Because without that potential, we don't have anything. We're writing things on pieces of paper and saying stuff. None of that has substantial material qualities. It's all ling. Everything about it is ling. Oh, thank you, Ken. That's nice color there on that. Both Kens are chiming in. It's great. So, do you want to hear another cool one? So soil is a major category of medicinals in the Bansao Gangmu. And of course, soils from various places have differing qualities. And even in the Bansao Gangmu, there are notions that the qualitative distinctions and differences between these soils could even be by virtue of mineral content and things like that, proximity to certain other geological features. These are merely chemistry at work. But the one I want to talk about is not any of that, because it doesn't matter in this sense. So the soil that I'm talking about is called Dongbi-tu, Dong as in wall, east, Bi as in wall, Tu as in soil. So the soil from the eastern wall. Now this would be the soil from that eastern facing wall on the typically geomantically positioned walled city, typical to certain eras of Chinese construction. The eastern wall would have been always made from some product that would be in the category of soil, either rammed earth in the very ancient structures, kiln cooked bricks later, stacked rock, anything, but they're all essentially some product of the terrestrial sort of like substrate soil, so to speak. The medicinal we're talking about is any of the matter that could be chipped, scraped, rubbed, or has already fallen to the bottom corner of the wall where it meets the ground and would be obviously part of that wall, this Dongbi-tu. So if this is the eastern facing wall, that means that this eastern facing wall has been continuously and only exposed to the rising sun, regardless, by the way, of the sun's trajectory or to the sun's passage in a northerly or southerly axis. That doesn't matter because it's still moving from east to west, whether it's down that way or up this way. The exposure of the eastern wall is always and only, especially if the wall is perfectly vertical, which it should be if you're building a wall to protect the city. That wall, that soil that's on the face of that wall will only and ever be exposed to the sun as it's rising. It will never see the sun after the very zenith of noon. Once noon transpires, 1 second later, that eastern wall is in shadow. The wall has only ever known the rising yang of the sun in its upward trajectory in the yang rising aspect of the day, never in the evening aspect of the day. only in the yang, rising up, sheng, uplifting, uplifting and rising. The medicinal is used for prolapse of the rectum and hemorrhoids. It raises the yang, specifically though, and interestingly, within the earth phase of the person as well, which is to say the digestive system as a whole, but specifically the spleen yang is the one that we would treat in a typical medical intervention to raise up the pelvic floor and all of its contents. So that quality of the rising sun constantly issued into that soil is captured as the qi that we will then put into the patient's body. That imbued quality of the rising sun is the qi, that qualitative qi that we're talking about, that characterizes this substance and its interaction with the human form. So the quality of that rising sun is now the qi of our body when that substance is within us, guided to the earth phase, which is to the digestive system, to grab onto and lift up the contents of our body that have fallen down. How does this relate to the Taoist practitioner? So I hinted at it a second ago. When we perform Taoist medicine, we are performing hold on, I have to close the chat. I get distracted because I want to get in there. I want to answer William's comment. The Taoist practitioner, we have a pretty simple pharmacopoeia. It's usually yellow paper and red ink. Oftentimes it can also be red paper and black ink, but let's just suppose that primarily our medical, the entirety of our medical tools is a brush, jusha, the red pigment, and yellow paper, and our voice and our mind. None of those have really, I mean, jusha does, and the turmeric that we use to dye our paper, we don't use commercially produced yellow paper generally. I mean, did I say turmeric? That's what I meant to say. I don't remember if I did. That's what we use. Those are very humble devices for the treatment of people. And so they must be necessarily elevated from paper to medicine. Now, how that works is not by the memorization of technical things, which is to say knowledge, although that's a part of it, because you have to write the thing correctly. It's not by virtue of well, I think I can just say that Taoist medicine will work in certain circumstances and it will not in others. And that's what we should be talking about right now, is what makes it work and how do we get to that place that we become a practitioner of that type of medicine. And again, the key word is imbuement. I don't want to, I really actually struggle with what I'm about to say often. And I do say it, and I have to in a way, because it's been proposed to me this way. But if we're using the term Taoist medicine, and I like I said in the beginning, that's a very loose kind of way to frame this whole realm. But let's just use that term, and we can talk about the other ones in the same light. It would be the same type of thing. To produce Taoist medicine, you have to be a Taoist. Now, I know that sounds gatekeepy, but it's not really, because anyone can become that. Anyone can do that. It's not an elite type of situation. It's just that, like any other technical endeavor, one should know what they're doing. and one should be qualified to do so, and one should engage the community of people who have passed that information down for a long time, so that what you're doing has been tested through trial and error, through at least the practice of some other people. Which brings us to, again, this notion of imbuement. The practitioner needs to be themselves imbued with certain qualities. Now, like before I was saying, in Taoist lineages, we sort of like, and this crosses over very well with Taoist soteriology, by the way, which is that our soteriology itself, our notions of salvation, are self-derived. So too are our notions of the imbuing of qi. We develop those ourselves. In addition to that, though, there is this other feature, which is connection to the lineage, and that is where another version. So remember, that piece of wood that grew out of that tree, it had its innate qualities. We too have innate qualities. But remember that bowstring? Someone did something to that catgut. Then someone took that string and did something else with that string. And then someone took that string from that device and did something else with it for a particular person. So there was an intentional quality to some of this as well. As the Taoist medicine practitioner, we are two just like that. We are the tree, but we're also the board with the rooster on it. And so we're the tree in the sense that we are innately a human being. We have the qualities of our basic humanity innately born into us. We may or may not evoke our better qualities necessarily, but they're there. They can be expressed. The Taoist lineage acts as the string maker and the crossbow stringer. The Taoist lineage takes that raw, innate human and initiates them into any said lineage and imbues in them the qualities necessary or the qualifications as well as qualities, we have to be honest, for them to provide Taoist medicine. So let me just break this down for you for a second. In my own personal experience, I have my ordinations and initiations into Taoist medicine have been of two types for me personally, and there's a third that I want to talk about. One is essentially meeting the teacher, learning from the teacher, providing feedback to the teacher that expresses and makes manifest my efforts. The teacher then decides that I will be taken in as a student. And then there is a transmission and or ordination in which my relationship to the lineage and its deities is made manifest. And at that point, I am imbued in the lineage with all of whatever that means. The other way is that I meet a teacher. I have met my teacher. I learn from that teacher. I show that teacher my, oh, by the way, let me start again. I meet the teacher does a divination protocol to see if I can even continue the conversation with them. That mantic practice then becomes the initial threshold, not a later one. An initial one, he wouldn't even talk to me unless my birthday, my name, and all of that stuff were aligned properly. And this mantic practice is actually not me asking him, it's him asking the deities in his lineage. And if that came up a no, I should never even reach out to him again because it will always be a no. Then, after that initial yes has been forged, we then begin our process of learning and then providing evidence of my learning. And then another divination is done to see if I can become part of that lineage and then get the name and make contact through various means with the deities associated with that lineage. So those are the two ways. One involves a mantic practice that supersedes any and all technical abilities evidenced to the teacher. He doesn't care. I could be the greatest student ever. If the throw is wrong, I'm out. And the other one was specifically based on the portrayal of ability and the evidence of hard work. There's a third, and that third one is something that I have yet to experience. It's generally experienced in the diaspora, in Singapore, Malaysia, and this would be possession or trance. And so I have no relationship to the Dangi practitioners and their families. I really do want that someday, but as of yet, I have not made contact. And so I won't speak on the transmissions through trance and possession. Can I show you a talisman so we have something to talk about? Okay. Let me actually better stop the share. We'll follow first. Okay. I'll show you a different one. Okay. Yeah. So I can show this to you. Some people get weirded out about public viewing of talismans, and I'm going to explain to you exactly why I'm not nervous about that and exactly why my teacher would be okay with this. There are many people here who know this talisman. They are colleagues of mine in our lineage. So this is a talisman, and I want to walk you through some of the features of this so we can understand this notion of imbuing the paper. This is the forms in our manuals are generally white paper, black ink for legibility and not to be mistaken as a usable tool. That's why it's like this and not red on yellow. This is a piece of paper with something written on it. But we need to look at what's written on it, and it will help us understand this notion of the imbued qualities, what's imbued into this, who's involved in that imbuement, in all of the ways that this could become medicinal. So looking at this, we see immediately, some of us see a few things taking place right away, which is there are a lot of deities involved in this one. And we can see them by their secret names here. You see my cursor? Here, here, here. These deities are they're the actual causation for the medical quality of this talisman. It's the fact that I could write this has nothing to do with its efficacy, or at least it's at the bottom rung of efficacy. Well, why don't we do that? Let's express the taxonomy or the hierarchy of efficacy in this thing. So first there is whether I write it correctly. That's very important. Second is higher than that is whether I have the authority to write this. Beyond that is the figures who embody that authority. And beyond that is what do I do to this once this part's done? And what I do is once this is the initial form. Do after this is we it's kind of like we deface the talisman, and while defacing it, which is to say we obscure part of it, we say an incantation. Now that incantation is a specific deity that we're actually calling the final piece, the key to this lock, is that deity, and also the request for what we want to happen in the uh, what effect we're hoping for in the utility of this as an intervention. So we see things like thunder and clouds, and there are numerological features, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all over the place. We see here, transform the body into iron, transform the body into gold or bronze in some cases. So we see that just by reading this thing, we see a variety of clouds and deities up here. We see the character Fa, which means not Buddha, it means, or could, but it means like a divine entity or its realm up here in the clouds. Like this is literally like a little heaven with a deity ensconced in the middle of it. And so by virtue of all of the cosmological correspondences here that are expressed numerologically in the loops, in every shape and contour, the naturally occurring within the environment, things like the 5 thunders, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all of these things are within the structure of this. These are what we're calling on. These are what we're engaging. These are the things that we are imbuing this paper with. And we're sealing that deal through our contract with the deities in our lineage, particularly the one that's notified in the incantation associated with this talisman. When all of those ingredients are put together, that is when this thing has its ling, its efficacy. That's when its chi is actually aroused and embodied in this simple piece of paper. It's 7:51. I think, you know what I think? I think I've said enough stuff. And I believe that Q&A could be a way for you to meaningfully steer me into some other conversations that you may be hoping to hear about now that we've gone this far. I'm sure that I've left things out, things that you want to hear about or ask me about or challenge me on. So Larson, is it okay if we open the Q&A? How do we do that? Is it in the chat? Do they come on mic? How should we do that?
That's perfectly fine. I think usually we do it, we can field questions through chat, and then also if anyone who wants to ask something, you either, well, probably want to use the raise hand function under the reactions button. That's probably the easiest one. And then if you just want to call on people directly, Josh, that would be great, or I could do it for you.
Yeah. I
So
can't see.
we'll open it up if anyone has questions.
I see Quinn has one.
Hi, thanks so much for this talk. At the beginning of your lecture, you mentioned the distinction between the internal and the external. And I was wondering, initially my immediate sort of conception was that the external would be outside of the skin and that the internal is the inside of the skin from a person-centric sort of perspective. I was wondering, it seemed kind of arbitrary. I was wondering where in your formulation that distinction actually lies.
What you're asking me is if what I mean by internal is somatic specifically?
Yeah.
As defined by the surface of our body and its interiority.
Exactly, yes.
Quinn, you had to lead with that?
My bad, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's a great question. And I think my wife is calling me. No, I do think, honestly, that there are distinct passages in text, scripture, etc., that really do define the body as existing within what we would call our exterior layer, which can include the chi that exists on the surface of the skin that goes beyond the very material aspect of our skin, but not very far, which I'm referring to as the wei chi. So I do mean within the layer of the Wei Qi, that is the line between the Zheng and the Xie. Literally medically speaking, that is the threshold. So that is what I mean. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure, sure. Hi, Brenda.
Hi. So, my big thing, of course, is I do a lot of sound therapy, singing bowls, tuning forks, that kind of stuff. And
Mhm.
a lot of what you have talked about today really strikes me, not intended as a pun, sorry. Um, because, a singing bowl is just a metal bowl or a crystal bowl or whatever, and it means nothing until you strike it. And it is that resonance that actually makes it useful, or in your parlance, efficacious. And so it's like the striking of these bowls or these instruments somehow gives it the efficacy that produces the effect that you are looking at. And so
Yeah.
it seems to me, and you can please correct me if I'm wrong, that basically what you're doing with some of these talismans is you're using a very different method of giving resonance to a physical thing.
I love that. I love that so much. What a wonderful metaphor that and it really does resonate, again, no pun intended, with the passage in the Tao Te Ching about the utility of a thing, of a vessel being its void. A bell is not a bell until it's struck. And there are qualities innate within us that are not evident or not made real until we bring them into being, which is specifically the Taoist dual cultivational path of cultivating Xing and Ming. We're working on two different frameworks and I'm not going to get into this right now in here, but this is exactly a very important and central issue. Our humanity is not our benevolence is not necessarily going to be manifest. It has to be struck, it has to be brought out. And we do that intentionally. We strike the bell of ourself regularly in our preceptual lives. Thank you, Brenda. That was a really great question too.
Well, I have a couple more things that I want to say if you'll give me the time for it.
Um, can we come back to you? Because I see Greg has got his hand up.
Absolutely.
All
This
right,
is Joe.
Greg.
Okay. Hi Josh. It's great
Hi,
to
man.
see you.
You too.
I'm so excited that you are doing this, and it's great to learn from you instead of just beside you. Um, so I had a question. It, a patient is being imbued, right, as well. You're not just imbuing like a substance or something. Is there a responsibility or opportunity that the patient holds to be able to receive the medicine? Is that taken into account?
Yeah. So, Greg, this is a great question, and it actually you preempt. I didn't get into it, and I was thinking about it. I've actually um, uh, delineating some of the features of a Juyo manual, a Taoist medical manual, and they usually and oftentimes start with a series of these sort of they're not just precepts. They also say things like those for whom a cure will not be possible. There are things like those who will not be efficacious, those who are dishonest, who think of money first, things like that. But then there are also, it won't work for people if they don't believe it's going to work. It won't work for people if they're resisting. It won't work for people who don't want to, you know what I mean? Things like that. So that we have these are written out, they're not suggested, they're actually quite overt. Um, and I do think that there is the ethical layer of this is really interesting because imbuing another with any quality, that is the nature of intervention. That's what intervention means. Uh, we're creating a doorway or a window, intervent into this other person. Um, and so we we have to always consider when we imbue another being with any quality whatsoever that we're doing so from the standpoint of only things like goodwill, benevolence, etc. And those features, though, like I was saying before, were those bells not struck in you, which is to say benevolence, say the bell of greed is the only bell you strike. When you imbue anyone with anything, that's not going to come out very well. So we cultivate the self so that the qualities that we hope to imbue in people are initially are initiated from a practitioner that is, to some extent, obviously, we're all imperfect, doing their best, so to speak, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Sure. I see in the chat, Ken Cohen, my friend Ken, writes, it's precisely because of these imbued qualities and innumerable variables that I feel that Taoist medicine does not lend itself easily to Western scientific measurement, replicability, or heaven forbid, licensure. Oh boy, that would be a sad day. This is interesting because we see latent in the Western study, actually, they're working with this. They're trying to figure this out because listen, every single study that's ever been done medically has that crazy little ghost called, the placebo effect. And so that's why we have to double blind. Double blinding is specifically making sure that the doctor themselves is actively attempting to imbue goodwill into the treatment. We're blinding the doctor so that they're not a liar. Because if they're a liar, it has outcomes. So we even see that in our very scientific method, that we're trying to maintain that the efficacy of mere human interaction, in the sense that with a single blinded trial, the patient doesn't know what's going on, but the doctor could be fully aware that they're proposing, doing something not. Go ahead, Ken. I see your hand.
Yes, but what I'm implying, I agree with you, but what I'm saying is that there are some things that can be measured, but there are going to be aspects that seem to be beyond measurement because of these imbued qualities. For example, when my teacher, Taoist Abbot Huang, would do a treatment, he sometimes had extraordinary effects that other people, even imitating the same treatment protocol, would not have the same results. When I asked him about that, his initial answer was, it's because when he puts in the acupuncture needle, as he put it, the needle is not the needle, my whole body is the needle, an antenna for the chi of heaven and earth. So unless one is in that state of, you could say, resonance with the universe, with the Tao, the same method doesn't have the same effect. Or for that matter, I saw someone mention something in the chat here about the connection with shamanic traditions in China. And I remember when I was studying some aspects of herbal medicine, even in China, I say even because people think of this more as, indigenous North American tradition, that plants were often, you would prepare yourself for gathering a plant through fasting, through ritual. In the case of gathering ginseng in Changbashan in the Everwhite Mountains, you would fast and pray, and then you go out with a hunting party at night so you could see the ginseng from the white glow of the flowers. And when you find the ginseng, 2 hunters shoot it with an arrow, lest the ginseng get up and run away. And there's a string attached to the arrow because the ginseng might get up. You follow the string, you pull the ginseng out of the ground, and then you paralyze it with bamboo acupuncture needles. Now you might say, oh, that's just magical thinking. The problem is there are aspects of this that we can actually measure. I mean, think about what happens when someone's practicing Taoist meditation and they're maintaining a delta brainwave state for 20 minutes while fully awake and conscious. That supposedly is not possible, yet it's been demonstrated. Now, two people applying the same technique, one in that delta state and one not are, I think, going to have a different outcome.
Yeah, yeah. And by the way, there's textual evidence historically for the type of practice, the herb gathering that you're referring to, obviously in the Bao Puzi we see that. The use of talismans, fasting. You go out, if you're looking for drugs of immortality, they're going to hide from you. If you're not cultivated enough to even see them, you won't. And so the medicinals won't even appear to the person who isn't imbued with certain qualities, let alone the efficacy of the use is out of the question if you can't even procure the medicine itself. Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah. Brenda, part 2.
Am I on?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So one thing I wanted to comment on is this whole idea of the relationship between the material and the non-material. And that
Mm-hmm.
I want to quickly express an experience I had with regard to Zheng and Xie. I was in China. I was vetting a Qigong teacher to see if I wanted to study with him. We went on this trip to anyways, we went on this trip, lots of temples, and I had caught a cold before we went. And what I discovered was that with this head cold, every time I got near to the teacher, I could feel something from the top of my head standing up. And as it stood up, all of my symptoms would disappear. And as soon as I walked away from this guy, all of my symptoms, like this, would collapse back down and all of my symptoms would come back down again. And so for years and years, when I taught my students, I would always tell them that, in my opinion, Zheng should be translated as upright, and Xie, as you have talked about, should actually be this idea of slanted. I really enjoyed your description. But
Oh, good. I'm glad.
I really wanted to introduce that, not to say anything about myself, but because I also wanted to talk about this idea of the relationship between the material, that which is apparently physically present, and that which is more rarefied. And it gets to, I'll very quickly read this, and I won't take too much time, but I'd like to have your comment on this, because I think it's really relevant. So I've been translating the book called Hua Shu, or the Book of Transformations.
Oh, I love that book. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. It's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so the first one is, I won't read the Chinese. So the commission of the Tao is that emptiness transforms into spirit, spirit transforms into qi, qi transforms into form, and once form is generated, then the 10,000 things are affixed.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes on from that. But what that to me really implies is that within the theory of Taoism itself, that this separation between the material and the more rarefied precedes anything that we can actually grasp in our head, because it all goes back to the Tao and it comes from the Tao itself. And so when you're reintegrating the material with the resonance, you're reintegrating back into the Tao. And I just kind of like to
Yes. Well, what you've described, Taoist cosmology, and that passage there, of course, parallels the Taiji Tu that we know from Zhou Dunyi and Chen Tuan, and the proliferation of phenomena from the Tao, or the empty, into the formed and its various qualities. And also Tao De Jing, the chapter Tao Sheng Yi, Sheng Er, Sheng San, San Sheng Wan, where the Tao produces the 1, the 2, the 3, the 10,000. So definitely, what you're referring to there is the essential Taoist or central Taoist endeavor, which is reversion, to go back upwards, backwards, to go from the phenomenal into an ever increasing winnowing until we're left with unity in a non-dual status. Ontologically speaking, of course, that would be what we would refer to as realization. So, yeah, your point is well made that we exist. The notion of qi is the basis for that framework. That cosmologically, qi emanates from this empty void, and it coalesces in varying qualities into all phenomena in their roughest forms. But as we ascend that phenomenological ladder back upward toward unity or non-duality, the chi is by definition more rarefied.
Well, I mean, I didn't read the second part of that, just for time's sake, but you know, I mean, the reverse order, it's always that, you know, spirit transforms to void. And so the linchpin for those of us who have this incarnated body is then the use of the spirit in order to be able to manipulate that relationship and reintegrate that relationship.
Yeah,
What do you think?
definitely. Yeah, that's what we call in the Taoist communities the cultivation of Xing, innate nature.
Yeah, yeah. And I love what
William.
you had to say today. I just wanted to get that out. I'm done.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Brenda. William, I see your hand was up and then down and up and down. There you are. Can you turn your mic on? Can't hear you. Hmm. Oh, I see William's also put it in the text here in the chat. He disagrees with everything outside the body as xie qi. I think the qi universe outside of the body is neutral. I did say that it is neutral. We refer to it as xie qi when it's not harmonious with the zheng qi of the human form. To be clear, phenomenological, external, naturally arising qi is not evil or crooked. It's only crooked in juxtaposition to the human body when they are in contention with each other, which is to say, when it's too cold for the pores or too hot for our skin. That's when the xie and the zheng are in a disharmonious juxtaposition. I hope that's the one you were trying to say, William. David, I see your hand up.
Hi, Josh. Good to see you.
Yeah, you too. Hi.
Hi. I was just wondering along the spectrum of will and the agency or efficacy of the person, to contrast this type of system of Taoist medicine, I'm thinking of, you know, two Western esoteric sort of traditions. You have more modern and, you know, maybe not as still esoteric, but you have chaos magic, which is like anything goes. You can use symbols, you can create things that will affect change into the outer world. That's very, you know, like coming from that Victorian sort of sense of what the mind can think of becomes true through volition.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have things like Islamic talismans based on astrological timing, where the right symbol at the right time within small periods of time can bring about large, incredible results. I'd say that neither of those speak directly to this idea of moral fiber, or maybe like, is that maybe, I guess my question is like, we're talking about duh, is this a question of duh? And is this, I guess like the centrality of it in this case, compared to the other types of Western esoteric systems, it seems like I'm just recapitulating that there is this kind of extra morality, maybe not in the church sense, but is there, I guess with the right instruction and things like that, without that, you were saying that this type of medicine wouldn't work. And I'm just trying to like see the different permutations of will within the sort of working with invisible forces, that sort of thing.
No, I understand the question, and it does prompt me to sort of to go back to things that I said before. So let me just do it like this. One of my lineages is specifically astrological in nature, which is to say the talismans that we provide are sometimes calculated. They're not interpreted by interpersonal interaction. They're calculated by virtue of the nine palaces, etc., as you know. And the so the efficacy or the appropriateness of any given talisman is defined by those features of calculation, just like it says in the Huangdi Neijing chapter 1. But the provider also has to be aligned through lineage, etc., in all of the ways that I was referring to. So efficacy there is it's sort of a two-pronged thing. There's the appropriateness of the treatment or the proposed talisman, etc., or interaction, intervention, whatever, because some of these are ritualistic in nature and may or may not include a talisman or can include things way beyond a talisman. But in either case, the practitioner themselves has to be of a certain quality. And so too does the intervention have to be appropriately calculated, etc., and manipulated. With ritual, we're talking about very prescribed things involving the shapes of the hands, the position of the feet, the way we walk, the way we hold our head. All kinds of things are happening that are expressed somatically. So there's a lot more than just the writing of a talisman from someone who has this lineage, blah, blah, blah. There's lots of stuff that are involved. And unfortunately, I can't get to that all tonight. But your question does, thank you, raise this issue of the technical features must, of course, be satisfied. So too must the demeanor of the practitioner be satisfactory.
And is that, in that vein, is that idea of what you're saying, like the moral fiber of the person, is that part of De, like from Dao De, like that sort of translation, or is that
that does essentially exactly what we're talking about.
Okay, because that's a good. I like that representation of it. It seems like better than justice or some sort of other.
Yeah, well,
translation.
Sabina Wilm's new book really does explore this in the specifically within the framework of Sun Simiao's writings. And so De, in that context, as virtue power, as she translates it, really does link up with our Taoist notion. So when we, for instance, when we go to our altar and we say our liturgies, we believe that generates de, a gong de, like a merit. That merit is a spiritual currency that we then have to donate back out. So that the good karma from the production of liturgy is something that we could amass in ourselves, but we know not to put ourselves first, and so we donate that merit back out. That is de as well. So de is a very multifaceted concept in Taoist practice, but yes, it's the accumulation of the qi that is derived from meritorious activities.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question. It was really great. Anyone else? Larson.
Sorry, I was looking for the raise hand button. If there's no one else who has questions, I think this is partially also an observation as well as a kind of question. But I'm thinking back when I was just at a conference this last weekend, we were talking about research on contemplative practices. And one of the key features, one of the key questions that we're starting to ask is about how to understand how context influences the way that the practice works. So if you're sitting down, even if it's something that's a fairly standardized, more modernized mindfulness meditation type approach, it doesn't always work the same way every time you do it. And there's a lot of other stuff that goes on around a person while they're involved, which include things. I mean, it includes the environment that you're in, but also includes these other aspects like the lineage and the connection and where you've gotten it from and what kind of environment you're performing it in. And so I think that what's interesting about this kind of topic is it's kind of pushing us to ask more about how that context gets involved, this idea of imbuement, and how it's not just, in some cases anyway, it's not just a simple function of this device causes this result, or if you perform X action, you always get Y result. But there's also this question of, well, on the one hand, cosmologically, what's going on, right? What's the weather like today? Where are the stars? What's going on with the different divination? But then also on a personal level, and this is something that I think maybe we can extend to other contexts as well, maybe for educators, for medical practitioners in whatever kind of medicine, how one's own kind of cultivation and what is brought to the room and is what is brought to the practice can then affect the outcome of that practice. Like a teacher who's really not having a great time is bringing a kind of energy to a room that is going to disrupt that. And so anyway, I just thought I'd highlight the importance of that in this conversation.
Oh yeah. So here's the thing. What you bring up, so that those can be externals, but they could also be within our own consciousness, these disruptions or whatever, these imbalances. And Li Dao-chun talks about this actually kind of directly. He refers in his discussions on like meditation to qi in a way that sounds like mood or the disposition, and we come to our practice in every iteration of it in a new disposition by virtue of the fact that every day is different. So every attempt at our cultivations will thereby start from a different foundation every single time, to some extent. And it's in developing, and we talk about this in the lineage and also textually, scripturally, this is written about it to a great extent. The regularity is critical, which is to say, what regularity does is it puts a clock-like framework into the practice that if we do things at a similar time each day, and if we do them for a similar amount of time each day, and we do them in a certain place each day, and all of those things, they start to diminish the potential for that chaos, that change in the qi of the environment, both externally, but also the qi of the mind, the mood, the demeanor. And that kind of disturbance that is a potential, or just vacillation, change, different flavor, any of those are similar because they're all distracting in a way. Those can be minimized by what we would call like regularity or constancy. Chang is the character.
Thank you. I think also perhaps Master Joe had his hand up at one point.
No, I just thank you, George. Thank you, Larson. Very nice topic. Because I want to bring up, I'm a priest, living in a temple. I want to share some like a story about that healing. First, I want to talk about the Taoism, magical Taoism. So I was met a priest in the temple that okay, I can talk in Chinese called 法术. Hey, if you practice, if you want to healing people, you need to practice. What's practice? We saw 749天, 49 days. You have all to your food. All to meat. Don't drink. Don't eat meat. Every day you have to practice the magic words. Then 49 days, then you can use that for healing people. We call the fire and that's that. So also you talking about the 符箓. You're talking about the 符箓. In the Taoist 符箓, we have a lot of different kind of 符箓. Like you share the 符箓, I think it's to kind of related to the Buddhist and the Taoism, the make up, you hear the picture. So all the Taoists, they have a different power. They always rate the 符箓as different situation. Like you rate the 符箓, the picture, I can say it's the picture, the Buddha and the Taoism. It's not for healing, for the ghost. I can see they have killing, have a ghost. Same for healing,
Yeah, we have a talisman reader in the house.
yeah, they have a lot of different, same for healing. In Wudang, I'm from Wudang. Okay, in Wudang they have a Taoist. They use the ball, use the different animals' ball. The people are sick. Then I just use, we actually it's so fun in Wudang. They have a 朱医生, like just like a day last year. They all he's a Taoist like a doctor. Is always very very good. And the guy no believe the Taoist like a 符箓 can healing people. So he no believe. Then have a people from like also have a person from somewhere come to Wudang Purple Temple. They can healing that. Just can healing that because they have diarrhea. like have they had diarrhea very, very badly. Then just the Taoism, the nun or woman, they just like, then the drinking it, the gone. It's just like, it's so amazing. Yeah. Also, I want to say, it's like so, 怎么说，有心理学的一部分存在里面，很多东西有心理学have like psychology or something like inside. I was met another priest in a temple, the healing people have a woman like around like 50, 60 years old. You come temple, oh master, I don't have energy. I don't know, I can't eat food. I'm, so weak, so energy. Then the priest, just, okay, can you stand up? The priest just use the hands like that. Like, okay, close your mind. Think I'm feeling my hands. The energy, how to through my. Then the energy, the woman like, oh, relax, relax. Then the priest, they just like yelling very, very strong, like, ah. Then the woman like, boom, the energy, spirit, just go up. Then the other woman, yeah. Oh, master, I'm good. No, his energy very, very good, very, very strong now. Just say the yelling and the energy, the feeling, just can through, like how to say, in the body, all everything can like move, all the energy move in the body. Like because when they have the problem, because the energy move good. This is it's a lot different way to healing. And another way, it's always the at the like a 医疗, like a doctor or something like a healing. The Taoist is actually so fun. What's fun? If you look at the Chinese, the old word, like a yi, the end is like a shaman, wu, the top is yi, yeah. This is the way. It's always Chinese and the yi, Chinese yi with the Taoism yi is a little bit different. Yeah, it's so fun. Thank you for bringing the topic. I just want to hear a little bit about that.
Shanyon, I thank you so much. I really love what you just said, and it definitely you have the courage to say some things that I didn't say. So I love that, and I thank you so much for your input. And it's good to see you, by the way. So what he did mention is interesting, which I did not mention because I didn't want to be too specific. Is that, like he said, we have 49-day procedures, which include celibacy, vegetarianism, very elaborate incantation and altar setups that we have to do for these 49 days in preparation to even take up the practice of Juyo, for instance. And so Shanyon brings that up. He also brought up the utility, and I think that if I didn't express this, I'm glad that Shanyon, or Master Zhou, I'm sorry, I'm calling you by your familiar name.
I think, thank you.
Okay. He brings up something really interesting, which is in our exorcistic practices in particular, at least the ones that I practice, there's a lot of stomping, there's a lot of screaming, and there's a lot of like, the incantations come through the teeth. There's spitting, there's potentially even slapping involved. It is a very robust interaction. And so it definitely does something to the patient, particularly if they're not expecting that. If suddenly you're screaming and stomping and spitting mouthfuls of wine into the air, creating clouds in the room, it's not your average medical intervention, for sure. And so I want to thank you, Shanyon, or Master Zhou, for bringing those things up, because they really do give the full color of what we're talking about. It's not just writing stuff on paper, we're doing other things. David, I see your hand.
Thank you. So when you mentioned constancy, my practice is mostly meditation based. So, and I know that in the Taoist tradition, there are 4 times of the day where yang is receding, yin is rising, vice versa. And people were, the rules were not rules, but the idea was you should be meditating during those 4 times of the day. In my conversations with Master Meng, he was talking to me about, well, when I was a hermit, I would, if I would meditate totally based on what felt natural. It had nothing to do with times of the day. If I felt like meditating, I'd meditate. If I didn't feel like meditating, I would go work and chop wood or something like that. So my question, I guess, is just in my practice in the kind of the urban world, I do meditate during certain times of the day, specifically like 4 in.the morning and then at about 11 at night or 10 at night. So I do feel that constancy, but I'm wondering a little if you could explain a little bit more about that. And then the other thing is there a difference going into a remote area, going into kind of living kind of a life of isolation for a period of time? Is there a difference in that constancy that in what you were talking about? And if you don't know, if this isn't an area that you've spent much time thinking about, I totally understand. Maybe something different.
So your teacher,
Master Meng?
Master Meng, just for everyone's clarification, is currently the abbot of Baiyunguan in Beijing, which is the seat of both the Taoist Association, the Taoist College, and the Longmen sect. Master Meng was, for a long period of time, a hermit. And so he has the dual perspective on really refined monastic living, but also living in the wild, as it were. And so his opinion on this is really interesting to me, David. And as you know, he's probably of two minds about a lot of things around these issues. One of my teachers, was a cave-dwelling hermit himself who then moved into his temple. He's my exorcism teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And he definitely has expressed to us the difference between being out there and being in there, if you know what I mean. And he insists on us doing a variety of practices that are out of doors in certain I can't tell you what kind of places, in certain kinds of places with certain types of qualities, specifically to engender a little bit of strangeness in our practice. And so, yeah, for sure, where we do things, when we do things, these are all very specific energetic qualities. They are different chi. An environment has a very different chi. The phase of the moon provides different types of chi. Whether it's uphill or downhill provides different types of chi. And precisely for our discussion today, what you're bringing up is really important, that the chi of the allotted hour in a temple when everyone else is meditating is very different from being in the wild and doing it when it feels correct. These are very different experiences. And depending on the lineage, depending on the particular imperatives of any practitioner, these things will obviously be really widely variant. So there's no real hard, fast rules that I've ever seen. They're all really particular to the immediacy of someone's practice and needs.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Well, we have reached about 8:32, which is sort of the end of the allotted time for the evening. But I want to thank you so much for coming and giving this really fantastic talk and sort of opening some doors for all of us to think about. I imagine we'll all be going home or if we already are at home, since this is virtual, and thinking a lot about this in the days to come. So thank you so much, Josh Paynter. And thank you everyone who came here tonight to join us and to listen to this lecture. We'll be keeping you updated on future events. In fact, as a very quick announcement, Master Zhou Shunyun, who just spoke with us a few minutes ago, will be giving a workshop this Sunday on the Brown campus. So if you happen to be close to the Brown campus, please do come and attend his workshop. And otherwise, we will keep you updated in future events. So thank you again to Josh Paynter. Thank you to everyone. And we
Thanks,
wish you a good
everyone.
night.
Good night. See you next week, Jess. Bye, everyone.
Larson, what's the seminar that Master Joe is giving this Sunday?
Well, if he was here, I would have asked him say himself. It's going to be we have the afternoon blocked out to do a workshop on Qigong and meditation discussion on that, and then he's also going to do some Tai Chi Chuan. I don't know
David,
exactly what he's going to do yet.
I can probably forward you in Messenger, the Facebook, if you want to just chime in to Facebook for a minute. I'll forward you what Xuan Yun posted about it.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I have Sunday free. I don't know if I can get up to Brown because that's a little bit of a hike for me on a Sunday, but yeah, at least I could see it.
It's 12 to 6 on the Brown campus.
Yeah. Okay. All right. This is great. Thank you. It's really nice to see everybody.
Bye, Josh.
Bye, Krista.
Well, this is great. I think, thank you so much again.
Oh yeah, I hope that was in keeping with the